If you develop a practice that makes your health and your prosperity your number one priority in life, you will radically increase the odds of getting everything you want out of life. I'm a big believer in having some source by which to draw upon that in order to get this positive affirmation to tell yourself you can do it, you will do it, you're going to do it, and I want to meet the person that's going to stop me from doing it. Recognize that self-care is really a necessity and should be prioritized in order to do all the other things you want to do in life. And a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, fail to recognize that.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. Hey, guys, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins, and I have in the studio Jon Sabes. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. Great to be here. Thanks.
Very cool. You come in, you're just so laid back. It's like, I'm just great. Tell our audience where you are right now, which makes you so great.
Well, I don't know where I am. I don't know about the greatness part, but where I'm at is I'm down on the East Cape of Baja, the Baja Peninsula. I'm in an area called Zacatitos. It was a dream for my wife and I to get down here after our kids grew up. And so we got here, and it's extraordinary. It's been amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Folks, Jon has had an amazing career, and this is kind of his retirement piece. He's put a book together called Healthy, Wealthy, and Longevity. And so we're going to talk about all that stuff. We're going to talk about his journey. But do me a favor, if you haven't done it already, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to our channel and then hit the bell so you get updates every time we do a new episode. So without further ado, Jon, if it's okay with you, let's get into it. All right?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. So, Jon, can you give us a little bit of your background, where you came from, and how you've gotten to where you are right now?
Sure. I mean, I'm a serial entrepreneur in the financial services industry. I started my career on Wall Street, went to law school, intended to go back into the financial services as an investment banker. And I ended up really becoming an entrepreneur. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I'm a third generation entrepreneur. And so it wasn't a surprise. And through my journey in financial services, I unwittingly became somewhat of a longevity expert. And that really makes me, I'd say, somewhat unique in my own professional journey and experience. And it's really why I wrote the book and sort of my own reflection of what I've learned over many years of being both an entrepreneur and learning about this thing called the human body and how it works. And I wanted to share that information for others, and hopefully it helps them on their journey.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome. We got a few things we got to unpack there. Tell me something. What do you feel like the most important thing you want to get across to our audience is going to be in our talk today?
Yeah, the most important thing I'd like people to take away from this conversation and my writings and what I do is that you have far more agency in your own health and your happiness than you may believe. And so the question is how do you get that? How do you get the good things in life for as long as possible? And that's what we were kind of talking at the intro of the show, which is, well, anything changed since I saw you last? I'm like, well, yeah, well, life's gotten better. So life should always be, it may not feel like that, but how do you increase the odds that that's the direction your life is going? And so that's what I want people to take away. They have a lot of agency in helping improve the odds. I can't guarantee, no guarantees in life, but improve the odds that that's the outcome.
Yeah, yeah, wow. Obviously, we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of founders and folks like that are kind of, I would say, kind of on that, let's say on that upward trajectory. It's like we don't really have that end zone, really, really clear in our minds where we want to go. I mean, what are your thoughts, or what would you recommend, for folks like that?
A couple things. One, there really isn't quote unquote an end zone. Okay. So let's kind of take away the end zone. Let's just say the journey. Where am I at in my journey? And where's that journey taking me? And as I write in the book, I'm in the midst of starting my next business. And as I was starting it, my mother got ill and passed. And so during this experience of writing the book, some things around longevity became deeply personal to me. And, when she was at her end, she said, my life's been a dream. And so what you want to get, the end zone at the end of the day, is when our time comes, you just want to be able to look back and say, my life's been a dream. And that really is the end zone. And so I would say to people, make sure you're pointing your life in that direction. That's the end. If there's going to be an end zone, because there is an end zone, unfortunately for all of us, the end zone is to be able to look back on life and say, my life's been a dream. And so then, what are the components? What are the essential components that weigh into that? And that's a function, I think, of your health and your prosperity. And again, that's what I write about in the book. This intention and how you go about getting those things. And so I think entrepreneurs are in that journey, and they need to be sure they prioritize think about what is that ultimate end zone. Why are we doing the things we do? And how do we build intention and value and meaning into everything that we're doing, so that at the end you can look back and say, hey, it's been a dream. What a ride.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm thinking, as you're saying that, it's like, we have these. You're giving us different pillars, so to speak, that that we would want to put into our companies, or into the way we're thinking or living our lives, and that sort of thing. If we started from the idea, just the idea of longevity, talk to me. What do you mean by longevity? I guess first and foremost, let's start there.
So, when we think about longevity, longevity as a word can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And what I want people to take away is from this word of longevity is living in good health for as long as possible.
Hmm.
So we have this concept called health span and lifespan.
Hmm.
Lifespan is how long you're alive. Health span is how long you're alive living without chronic disease.
Yeah.
And so what we really want to try to do is maximize our health span inside the limits of our lifespan. And so that's when I'm talking about longevity, it's sort of like it's the quality and the quantity of your life. And what's interesting is if you focus on sort of improving the quality of your life, you naturally extend the quantity of life you get. That's the really great thing. It's like you don't have to work on both. And so that's a key concept for folks to think about. And then how do you add value into that health span, and how do you go about doing that, and what gives it more meaning and more wealth of experience? When I talk about wealth, I'm not necessarily talking about financial wealth. I'm talking about wealth. And wealth is a multifactorial input. Money is one of those things, but it's not exclusively how I define wealth.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. You talk about the quality of life. I know for me, I do, put time into, working out and trying to stay healthy. But I find that I feel like, there's just an incredible amount of stress, that I take on with running my company, with, leading my clients, with, supporting my family and that sort of thing. I mean, how do you, at my stage, I would say, what kinds of things would I want to be thinking about, or what kinds of things would I want to do to make sure that 20 years from now, when I'm 70 or so, I've done the things that I need to do, in order to create that longevity, that health longevity, in particular.
I write about, I lean, and we're affiliated with, so the folks from Blue Zones, and I lean a lot into these Blue Zone concepts.
Hmm.
Blue Zones were, for those who don't know what Blue Zones are, Blue Zones were these 5 population geographic locations around the world dubbed Blue Zones, because the populations were found to live measurably longer and
Hmm.
measurably happier. And
Hmm.
so this guy by the name of Dan Buettner, who's a fellow Minnesotan, kind of discovered this, published in Nat Geo, and he went about studying, what are the qualitative measures where these people live not only longer or healthier without chronic disease, but are also happier. And what we find is that, right, so you're doing the things you need to do, right, which is you're eating wisely, your movement, you're exercising, but you're also working on your family, things that give you purpose in life, and you're connecting with others. And so I just think you want to be building all of those sort of components of your life through your journey, but also recognize, as you were saying, sort of this, recognize that self-care is I believe, sort of a foundation. If you're not taking care of yourself first,
Hmm.
how can you care for others? How can you care for your family?
Yeah.
I did a lot of ultra endurance stuff, Ironmans, ultra trail runs, and people would say, well, what are you training for next? And my answer was always, I'm training for life. I want to have the endurance to sustain the challenges that I know are coming. I don't know what they are yet, but they're going to come. And I don't want to be overwhelmed by them. And I want to be
Yeah.
in a position to help others and those I love and those I care for. So I guess when you're thinking about that stress of even adding in sort of health and self-care, recognize that it's a priority, because if you don't have your health, I don't know about you, but if I'm running a fever, I'm helpless.
Hmm.
If I'm sick, I'm worthless. And now, not only that, I'm a liability. My wife's having to care for me. You know, I'm my business is suffering because I can't be productive. So recognize that self-care is really necessity, and should be prioritized in order to do all the other things you want to do in life. And a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, fail to recognize that, and they think they're like, oh, I'm not spending time on my business. I'm not doing these other things. I think that's a mistake that's easy to make, and one that is it's not a good one.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. One of the things that comes to mind is, that idea of, I don't know. So you mentioned, prioritizing your health, and I think that, and I'm wondering, do you recommend, when, perhaps you had a situation, you're dealing with something that's, really, really heavy, and you may reach a point where perhaps there's a flag or a trigger, something like that, that says, hey, I need to step back, from the business and focus on my health. I mean, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, look, I've had my share of heavy, no doubt, and what I always found was that when I would go for a run, or I'd go, just a walk or a bike. So those were the three things that I really did rely on. And I would plug some what I call brain food into my iPod or my phone. So I'd put some positive psychology brain food on, and I'd just go walk, and I would just listen. And I would feed my brain positive affirmations. And I'm open minded. Whatever works for you is what works.
Yeah.
So I'm not prescriptive that way. So whatever movement you like, just get outside, get that fresh air,
Yeah.
breathe, listen, get the positive affirmations, maybe turn everything off, and allow the ideas to flow out. Right, work them out as you're working, as you're letting your body unwind. So for me, that was a big way in which I was able to relieve some stress and find solutions and find that inner strength when the road looked really dark and I wasn't sure what happens next and it wasn't all good, but I somehow found strength and I found solutions where they didn't seem to exist. So that would be one. The other thing I would say about this is that what I also found in my career, as I said, I kind of unwittingly became somewhat of a longevity expert by really focusing on what is health, how does DNA work, how does gene expression work. I really got into that through my professional journey. And what I found was that the more I focused about learning about health and wellness, just
Mhm.
learning, my world just kept getting better. Like better opportunities just seemed to come my way. I'm not sure why that is. But so that would be the other thing I would just say to folks was and maybe it's in a realm of positivity. When you're thinking about health and wellness and you're learning about it, you're in a state of positive affirmation and you attract others who are in that same way and want to help.
Wow. Wow. That's brilliant. What do you mean when you say you're a longevity expert? Dig into that a little bit for me.
Yeah. So I guess I have a fairly deep understanding, at least from, let's call layman's for maybe all the people. Look, as I mentioned, I started my career on Wall Street. I went to law school, blah, blah. I didn't know anything about DNA. I grew up in the 80s, right?
Hmm.
So the most I knew about DNA was from sex ed. Like, I'm like, okay, let's make a baby. And so that was all I was really interested. But so when I was in my business and part of my business relied on predicting how long people live, I was loosely working around the life insurance industry of all places and predicting how long people live. And I got very frustrated with the methodologies, which felt like they were locked in 1967. And I'm like, wait, there's got to be a better way to understand how long people live. And I was barking at my team and no one was doing much, I thought. And so I started reading peer reviewed scientific journal articles, and there's this thing called the internet. And you can access the amount of information you can access. And by the way, this is before Chat GPT and all this other stuff. So, but I started reading peer reviewed scientific articles to understand, was there a connection between DNA and human longevity? And through that process, I learned what DNA was, how does it function? What does its molecular structure look like? And through that journey, I then learned about this science of epigenetics and what they call biological aging as measured by this
Mm,
epigenetic clock.
mhm,
And what the science of epigenetics is how our genes express. So we're born with a fixed set of DNA, half from mom, half from dad. But that's only the beginning of the story. And what we learn is that as we engage in our lifestyle, our thoughts, our intentions, our actions, we're creating chemical signals, literally chemical signals called DNA methylation that attaches to the genome and at the epigenome, which is the epidermis, the skin layer of the genome, and causes the DNA to express. So, this is the scientific method in which to understand how lifestyle impacts health and wellness at a molecular level, literally. And so that was my journey where I was like, oh, wow. And so I ended up, meeting with the guy who invented the epigenetic clock. I licensed that technology from UCLA exclusively for the life insurance industry. And there goes my journey into, I'll call the molecular science of aging and health. And so that's when I say a longevity expert, and I talk about it real specifically in the book. What are the hallmarks of aging? At a molecular level, I challenge people to think much smaller than they're accustomed to and think about their biological machine as this beautiful machine that's created from DNA. But again, how do you have agency on the expression of that DNA? And epigenetics is a foundational science of how to understand how we are who we are.
So dig into that a little bit. How do we make that connection? The science is one thing, but our lives are something else altogether. We talked a little bit about working out, but I mean, how do we become intelligent and make great decisions with respect to increasing our longevity?
Yeah. Well, get the book, read it.
That's
But
that's
there's
a cheat
plenty of
code.
there no, there's plenty of things to watch, but I think it's really just recognize that again, science is pretty clear on this. We are who we are. Our DNA is about 20 to 30% of who we are.
Hmm.
And so understand that your lifestyle, your decisions you make, every decision you're making, okay, around your health, around your business, whatever you're doing, right, is impacting gene expression, literally. And so gene expression is the synthesis of proteins, protein synthesis. And
Hmm.
so you're informing, if you will, your DNA how to express itself and how to build proteins. And we're this big bag of water and protein. That's all we are, with some electricity running through, and gives us this kind of crazy ability to have a conversation. So really, I mean, at a physical level, that's what we are. And so when I learned this, it was like learning, like, say, oh, well, if you have a cold, you got to have chicken soup. Well, why does chicken soup help cure the cold? Like, I could never make that connection. But when I learned that we actually have a lot of control over our genetic gene expression, it was like, oh, that's why working out is so powerful. That's why thinking positive affirmations is so powerful. I am influencing the protein synthesis, right, of this biological machine through my thoughts and through my actions. That's all you got to know. You don't need to know more than that. And so once you know that, right, you have a lot more agency about the whole damn thing. Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, I know when I do curls, I'm working on my biceps and blah. I get that part. But what I didn't really, again, fully appreciate was how I'm impacting my biology at a much, much deeper level, and how that then has the power to impact my life in its holistic way.
Okay, that makes sense. Of the three, happiness, health, and prosperity, what's the part of the, I guess, the formula that people typically miss out on or overlook?
I think it's the health. I mean, it's what we always take the most obvious things for granted. So I think again, I don't know about you. Oh, you put off going to the doctor. "Oh, I'll do that." So again, "Oh, I'll get the workout tomorrow." Again, so I think pulling that forward with some intention around that health and focus on, again, being much more conscious about what you put in your mouth, what we eat, being much more thoughtful of moving, take the stairs, not the elevator. I mean, there's lots of little choices you can make throughout the day, I believe, to bring that health forward. Prosperity, I mean, for the entrepreneurs, they probably got that, they're working real hard on that prosperity. And so I don't think that's so much, I'll call a message for your audience. Although I would say that what I do write about is when you I don't believe in work life balance. And so some people who read my book take some solace in that, like, oh, finally, a guy who just made me feel better that I like to work all the time. I like to work all the time. And by the way, I'm not going into retirement. So this book is not about retirement. I'm on my next business I'm about to publish a blog article called The Retirement Fallacy. So look, if you want to play golf and fish when you're 65, 78, that's great. Recognize, I mean, I really believe that your work in life should be symbiotic. Y- And if it isn't, then question what your work is. That work should give you energy. Not all the time. It's work they call it work for a reason. They don't call it fun, right? So it's work, but it should provide energy. And that energy should then kind of connect into your life where it gives you positive energy around your family and your friends. Doesn't always work that way. Trust me. I come out of my workday plenty of anger. And so, but on the whole, I really write about and thinking about how do you create a life that's symbiotic and works together so it's self-reinforcing. So when you're thinking about your prosperity, don't look for shiny objects. Look inside, go to the smaller bits of your business and your problems. Don't chase shiny objects. Work like hell, as Elon Musk says, and stay focused and know the road continues.
Fantastic, fantastic. What does happiness mean to you?
Wow. What does happiness mean to me? I think happiness means to me, in some ways, being in somewhat of a flow state, like you said, I came onto the podcast. I'm pretty laid back. First of all, I'm not a very laid back person, although people perceive me to be pretty laid back because I'm in a state of happiness. I'm in a state of like, wow, am I living in Baja? Is this my wife? We're getting along great. My next business feels like it's really exciting, so to me, that's being in the state of happiness. Although for me, as I said at the outset, I think happiness at the end of the day is something that you look back and I'm really focused on happiness when I'm 80 and 90. I'm really thinking about that happy guy. Like,
Yeah.
what is it going to mean for that guy to be happy? Because that's the guy that I'm less empowered to care for. So I'm trying to take care of that guy today because he's that future self guy. He needs me today. And I want that guy to be happy. And so for me, happiness will really be sort of that guy looking back and going, man, like my mom said, my life's been a dream. No matter what, no matter when it ends, I said, that's it. I did it, and I want to be as happy as she was at her end of life. And so that's ultimately, I think, should be the goal for most of us.
I love that. I love that. I've heard people say, it's like pursuing happiness is like this fleeting thing because happiness is just so situational. I love the way that you presented that. I mean, that's very different. I've never heard it presented that way. Thank you for that. You describe work as an art form. So how do you reconcile ambition, peace, drive with presence?
I don't reconcile them. I don't at all. I say bring it. I think yeah, there's no need to reconcile it. There's no need. You should have as much drive as you want. You should work as hard as what you want. And I think I find peace. It's like a good workout. When I have a good workout, I kind of have this endorphin rush. And I'm like, wow, that felt good. So when
Yeah.
I'm working really hard, it's sort of that's on that I find that on the counter side of it. I write about it, as an entrepreneur, it's like a painter, why do you do what you do? It's like, why do you ask a painter why he paints? He's just got to paint. He doesn't reconcile how much painting he does. And, he's up all night. This is a painting by my son behind me. And, so a painter paints. And by the way, as I was talking about this with my son, you just recognize this too. Some of the most grandmaster painters in the world died. When they died, they were considered abject failures. penniless and failures. And yet today, their art is regarded as the master. So just recognize this. You don't even know what you're creating and the ripples that it's building. So I don't reconcile it. I want to paint, and I'm going to paint as much as I want to paint. And I'm going to rest as much as I need to rest. And I'm going to get up and I'll paint some more.
Love it. I love it. I love it. You're my hero there. What kinds of things, as a founder, what kinds of things might I create or put into my environment to support, my ideal longevity, if you will?
Yeah, great question. And I'm gonna credit again the guys over at Blue Zones for this, which is the question is how do I what do I put in my environment? And the advice is to shape your environment. And again, I write a lot about this. So you want
Mhm.
to shape your environment to make the better choice the easier choice. And so the simple example is if your pantry is chock full of salty, sugary snacks and the freezer's got 4 quarts of ice cream in it, I mean, who could fault the guy for going in there and killing off a quart? I'll do it all the time. I mean, one of my battles with my wife was if you ever buy another package of those Oreos again, we got a real problem. Okay. That's a simple example of get rid of that shit. Don't put that stuff in your pantry. Make it more difficult to go get. It's
Yeah.
okay to, after dinner, take a drive or a walk to the yogurt store and get a little yogurt and say hello to the counter person, give them a smile, crack a joke, give
Yeah.
yourself a treat, a reward. That's great. But don't make that stuff easy. Put your running shoes in front of the door. On Sundays, go to the grocery store, quick pack a bunch of meal, cook and pack some meals in some Tupperware and stack them in the fridge. So you've got healthy meals along all throughout the week. You can just grab and go, put in your pack, eat them on the car, eat them wherever it is in the office. So the point being is shape your environment in a way that makes the better choice the easier choice. And that's how you shape your environment. And it doesn't matter what environment you're in. You don't need to be by the beach. Anywhere you are, we can all clean your house, clean the closet, empty the drawer full of the receipts that have been sitting there for 2 months. Do it. Just do it. And it cleans your mind. It sets you up for this positive emotion that you're going to need to draw on to keep moving you forward in your journey in a positive direction.
I was going to ask you about, I was going to ask you the same thing with respect to like mental or spiritual health. Do you have more to dive into with those areas?
I'm a big believer in the I'll call the power of positive psychology.
Hmm.
So, I'd say my book is a positive psychology self-help book type book. And again, I'll go back to this idea of biology. When we emotionalize our thoughts, right? Positive thoughts. When we emotionalize positive thoughts, right? We're putting literally chemical energy into our brain, positive chemical energy in our brain. And we
Yeah.
want the positive chemical energy in our brain to overwhelm the negative energy in our brain.
Yeah.
And so I really think when we think about spirituality, wherever you get that spirituality, whether that's faith based or just simply infinite intelligence or wherever that is, yeah, I'm a big believer in having some source by which to draw upon that in order to get this positive affirmation to tell yourself you can do it, you will do it, you're going to do it. And I want to meet the person that's going to stop me from doing it.
Yeah.
And you got to tell yourself that on and on and on until your subconscious mind believes it to a point where it's like, I want to meet the guy who's going to stop me. I own my narrative. I own my narrative. And I'm not going to let anyone define my narrative other than myself.
I love your like low key, just like incredibly competitive. Absolutely love that. I love that. You kind of touched on it a little bit. I was thinking about, rewriting our mental models about, what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about health and that sort of thing. Is there a particular, I mean, I know that you said to, say it over and over again, but is there a particular process that you use or that you would recommend for someone that is going from, say, hey, you know what, I'm just floating through life, life is happening to me, to, hey, I'm being intentional about, longevity?
Yeah. Again, I'd say absolutely. So I definitely have a practice, and again, I would say developing a practice is paramount. To find some sort of practice that works for you, your own practice, to support that, and not only that. I mean, it's support your prosperity, support your health, and be intentional about that. I use journaling. So I used, and I've developed these little prompt journals over many years. I was introduced to this idea of prompt journaling many, many years ago through a Tim Ferriss podcast talking about the 5 minute journal. I went and looked at that piece, and it was this big book, and it was this size. I was traveling all the time, and I don't want, I'm a minimalist. I like to travel like minimally. And so I ended up going to Kinko's, and I designed my own little pocket journal, and I would spiral bound them. And then I ended up printing some, and I would hand them out to people, and I was getting
Uh-huh.
really positive responses. So point being is I've made these prompt journals now are available as a companion to my book. I really believe in journaling as a way in which to help you develop your practice. And these are very short journals. So it's journal like 5 minutes, literally every day in the morning, to set that intention, to kind of ground you on what's important to you and set you in the right point. So it's that repetitive nature, of that affirmation to kind of really that you're going to need. It's it's a marathon, right? It's a race, but this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And so you really need your coach. I call that little journal is your self coach.
Hmm.
So if your coach isn't with you in between coaching sessions, who's there reminding you to do the things you need to do to get what you want out of life?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is sort of like where you've got your affirmation, then you just kind of reflect on whatever that affirmation or that thought was. Is that kind of what that
Yeah, I mean,
looks like?
again, in the back of the book, and by the way, I will give any listeners who connect with me on social media and DM me, for the first 10 people who do that, I will send the book and the prompt journal package to them. So I'll make that offer right now, because part of what I want to do in this world is just get these tools out there for
Oh,
people to
awesome.
try, and hopefully they work. And I've already, over the years, I've gotten lots of feedback where people are like, "Oh my God, this is so good." But it's simply to really focus your mind. I like to say we're in a battle for our own attention and intention. So you have
Yeah,
all this messaging and incoming bombarding you to try to
yeah.
get your attention and intention towards what they want. And what's critical is that you center yourself to what you want, and first, and hold that attention and intention, and then interact with the rest of the world. And I believe journaling is a way in which you do that. So it's beyond just the sort of the affirmations. It's sort of, what are my priorities today? What could have been better yesterday? What am I grateful for that happened? And so it's really kind of very simple stuff, but it helps with that battle, as I like to describe it as.
I love that. I love that. You said a few times you mentioned like purpose and purpose as part of that whole equation for for longevity, for health and wealth. What does that? How does purpose play into all of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, without purpose and or intention, right? It's a vacuum. So your
Yep.
mind and your world is a vacuum. So either the world will fill the vacuum for you, or you'll fill it. And so you have to, it's like putting your oar in the water. You could be drifting. You're either drifting, or you put the oar in the water and you're setting the keel in a direction, and you're going to hit waves and the wind's going to blow you around, but you're heading in a direction. And so that's foundational, is what is your purpose? You got to have some, and it can be big or small. You could have a small one just for the day, but what's that overarching purpose? And sort of, I go, well, my overarching purpose is I want to be able to say my life's been a dream. Like, that's it. That's my purpose. So what am I going to do today to help fulfill that?
Okay. 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 Um, how would you encourage an entrepreneur, just looking out over like a 10-year horizon, how would you encourage them to perhaps redefine winning along the lines of what you're sharing with us?
I guess I would encourage the entrepreneur to, over a 10-year time frame, don't get discouraged in the short term. You, you're gonna hit a lot of obstacles. So don't be discouraged. Continue on in your journey. Even when it seems so difficult, and you may not know what happens next. What I would say is, don't don't quit.
Yeah.
Keep pushing on. Push through those hard moments. Don't let anyone tell you you can't have what you want out of life. You can have it all, and it's for you to decide and for you to go get.
Wow, I love that. How do you switch your mind from that? You use the term, from that scarcity mindset to that abundance mindset. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, you got to get rid of comparison. Comparison is the thief of all joy, right? So if you start comparing your lifestyle and what you have to others, it just starts getting really, that's when things, you can really start beating yourself up and feel like you're not making progress. And that's a mistake. So what I would suggest is just focus on you. Focus on your needs and what your wants are and so look inside, don't look outside because it gets really challenging about everyone's got everything. Well, guess what? Everyone doesn't. Okay. And you have much more than you think you have. I'll guarantee it. I'll guarantee you have way, way, way more than you think you have. And if you go to the blue zones, what you'll find is these people have hardly anything, but they lived much longer and are much happier. So guess
Wow.
what? You have way, way more than you already know than most everyone else in the world. So stop comparing yourself to others. But at the same time, know that there is abundance for you and an abundance awaits you, and you're just going to have to keep working for it. There aren't any shortcuts, and things are going to happen in weird ways and challenging ways, but abundance awaits those who expect it and those who focus on themselves first and work really hard on themselves and what their job and their purpose is. That's where the abundance starts to show up.
Nice,
And it
very nice.
could be, it may not be in money, by the way. You may
Huh?
just find yourself being happy. Just, oh my, you're happy with your family and you're like, gosh, I thought I needed all this, but it turns out I don't. Someone may say, no, I still want all of that too. So abundance has many, many forms, and just be open-minded to having abundance. And don't compare yourself to others.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny you say that. I've been like working on just like getting rid of stuff. You were saying you're a minimalist. I'm getting there. I'm just like there are just so many things that, I just feel like I just don't need. One of the other things that you said that struck me earlier is you talked about gratitude. How does that play into your whole, health, wealth, and longevity?
Gratitude is just this like simple life hack. I mean, I would say, well, John, are you a longevity? First of all, are you a longevity biohack or something? I'm not. Okay. What I want to tell folks is if you it's the 80-20 rule. If you focus on what you put in your mouth, what you eat, and your movement, you're getting 80% of it right. You're getting 80% of your future healthy longevity. So that's where I'm at. I'm not a big supplement, Strava, this, that, or anything else. I do try to get the holistic things right. Gratitude, sort of this little hack, and it goes to this: you have much more than you already think you have. Just be grateful for what you have rather than upset or discouraged or frustrated about what you don't have. So gratitude is just this little life hack that if you can just step back for a moment and be grateful for something, my cute little dog next to me, the fact that this internet connection worked for the most part today, which has brought me happiness and versus frustration. I mean, there's just so much to be grateful for. And it has the unique benefit of creating biochemicals, right? That will flood your system and give you that sense of ease. So it's just a little hack by being grateful for something. You're hacking your system.
Okay, cool, cool.
You can look at
Let's
every
wrap it up.
situation. You can look at every situation to be angsty about it or whatever,
Mhm,
or grateful for it. There's not a situation. There's this idea called the seed of equivalent benefit, where
mhm.
in every horrible bad situation you may come across, there is a seed of equivalent benefit, which means there's something in that situation that can grow to lead to something better or greater than whatever it is you thought the bad thing was. So the way you get to the seed is you start looking for it immediately. And the way you
Yeah,
start getting it to is be grateful for what you have.
yeah, yes, 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 yes. Kind of reframing that story.
That's right.
Yeah. So, last question for you: what is the most important thing besides buy your book you want the audience to walk away with?
Again, I think we've touched on it, but I'll reiterate it. If you develop a practice that makes your health and your health and your prosperity, your number one priority in life, you will radically increase the odds of getting everything you want out of life. And that would be the core message I would leave folks with today. And that's healthy, wealthy longevity. It's the good things in life for as long as possible. It's that simple.
Yes, that's where standing up and sharing for it. Thank you so much, John. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, find me at Jon Sabes, JONSABES.com. I'm on all the social media platforms. The first 10 people who connect with me and DM me on any one platform will get you books and journals. So hopefully this podcast has some value for folks out there. Appreciate you, Rick, and what you're doing out there.
Likewise. And of course, we'll get all that information on your show notes so people will be able to go to that page to see the video, the audio, the giveaways, and a little bit about you and be able to reach out to you. Folks, thank you for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. Keep winning.